Hello and welcome to that Eurovision site, Eurovision with a Slice of Life. It is the Sunday after Belgium's Eurosong 2023 took place, and today me and Isabel are going to discuss our thoughts on the Belgian selection. There were shows throughout the whole week in Belgium. All artists went into the competition with two songs. Throughout the last week, the artists picked between the two songs. The artists were revised by the other Eurosong 2023 acts, however, the decision was ultimately down to them. Then last night, the final took place where all seven artists sang their competing song, and Gustaph was chosen to represent Belgium with his song Because of You. Gustaph won the vote combined, despite Gala Dragat winning the jury with her song 10 Sheds and the Stalins winning the televote with their song Roller Coaster. My first question would have to be, what were your thoughts on Gustaf's win?
I think Gustaf's win is so interesting. It caused a bit of an upset, didn't it? Because I know that Sherine was such a fan favorite. Ça m'ennuie pas was my favorite as well going into the final. I know it was a lot of our favorites. Gala Drago as well had, kind of a really big sort of groundswell of support in the fandom. So, and I mean, no one seemed more surprised than Gustaph himself by the win. It's always fun when someone wins unexpectedly. I think there's always something really delightful about the story there. I think it's going to be really fun to watch him progress through, the whole Eurovision journey, because it really seems like he wasn't expecting it. And so it's going to be really fascinating. He seems lovely, and it's a super uplifting piece. It's really reminiscent of 90s diva house, which is nostalgic to me because I was growing up during that time. That was when I first came to the UK. The lyrics in the chorus, for me, feel a little bit weak. That's my one quibble with the song. I'm picky about that, though. I'm picky about my lyrics. I like the verses a lot, though, and the message and the spirit of the song is great. It's flamboyant. It's flamboyantly camp. I loved his costume. I know that that's maybe a divisive opinion because it was flamboyant, and that's always going to be divisive, but I'd so much rather see that than something safe or staid. I think that we're going to see, I hope that we're going to see even more with the budget that comes with Eurovision. I can't wait to see what costumes he rolls out for as part of the Eurovision. I think he's going to be fun to watch on the carpet, isn't he? I actually loved that costume. I thought it's too much, but like in the best possible way. I just wish maybe the lyrics had seen another edit, maybe had another perspective, but I'll be honest, when I first heard it, I was like, what is this? This is not it. Like, it felt, because it has that like 90s house vibe to me, with like lyrics that aren't super, super strong, that can feel a bit dated. But then in performance, and particularly his reprise, and seeing all the kind of joy and in the staging, and something shifted for me even just last night. We're recording this, as Jazzi said, the day after, so we're like still coursing the adrenaline from last night. Even just the sort of second time I heard that on the stage live, I like went from thinking, oh, I don't know about this, to just kind of loving it, actually. And I'm actually really behind this. I think it's going to get even more enjoyable as time goes on. I think this might become a bit of a campy club hit. I hope so anyway. The reason I find it so interesting, besides the fact that he obviously wasn't the front runner, nowhere close, and didn't seem to be expecting the win, is that it completely breaks the trend of Belgium sending moody, almost angsty pieces to Eurovision. The last time we saw something this upbeat from Belgium was Laura Tesoro's What's the Pressure in 2016, which I enjoyed, but which feels so different to Belgium's recent entries. And it's also interesting because I wonder if it sort of captures a trend. There were a lot of quite strong upbeat entries in Eurosong. My favourites were Ooh La La and Ça m'ennuie pas. But I wonder if this is kind of a moment of a sea change for Belgium, and maybe even for Eurovision in general. Like, it's too early to say, but my little brain is firing off. I noticed that out of the 3 songs that we've got confirmed for Liverpool so far, none of them are ballads. Not really, even Dewey isn't really a ballad. It's sort of, they're all uplifting, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
I'd say Do Your edges more on the side of like ethnic rock than a ballad, but
Yeah,
my
it's sort of,
opinion. But
it's got elements from a few different genres, hasn't it? So it's maybe a bit more difficult to classify, but it's certainly not a straight ballad, and it's a bit slower tempo than Ukraine's and Belgium's songs that they've selected, but it's certainly not, it's not a down tempo song. And all 3 of them are uplifting songs in theme as well as in, you know, beat and, rates per minute. I just wonder whether maybe people are sort of want something to party to. We've had some really tough years, and I mean, Måneskin, I think, exemplified sort of a moment of Europe wanting to. There were some glorious pieces that were less kind of angry and energetic and celebratory, even, right? Like, there was a real rage to Måneskin's Titi Buoni that won in 2021, and this is totally different, of course, but I wonder if that felt like it was really like a kind of like, yeah, we're actually, we want sort of sexy, kind of gritty, something a bit more sort of that'll shake us up a little bit more. And this season so far, I think we've just seen a lot of real strong front runners, some heavy hitters with really great quality ballads, and not necessarily making it into the top place, not performing as well as we thought they would. And we've seen that in all of, I think we've seen that in all of the selections so far. And yeah, I wonder if we're not just kind of ready for something that's a bit more spirited, uplifting. Either way, whether we see fewer ballads this year or not, it's too soon to tell, really. We're seeing disco come back, and disco influencers, I should say, come back in a big way to Eurovision. House is, comes from disco as a genre. You can hear it in the beat. So listening to both Gustaf's winning song and also Ooh La La, which is like a Latin disco beat. That's interesting. I have called it because we're in a 90s revival, kind of fashion wise and aesthetics wise, and the 90s were kind of the 70s on repeat, and so it makes sense that disco is, also coming back as part of that. And we saw some disco influence last year as well, most notably from Lithuania. So that's fun and interesting, because disco really had a grip on the contest for like quite a lot of the latter half of last century, and then we haven't seen so much disco influence in the sort of the first 2 decades of this century. But I think we're seeing disco come back, so it'll be interesting to see if that is a trend that continues through the other selections. And finally, I will say I'm selfishly sorry that Belgium isn't sending a French language song to Eurovision this year, specifically French synth pop, which is a favorite genre of mine, and Sherine would have really kind of exemplified that genre so well with Ça m'ennuie pas, but that's always next year.
yeah. So I'm gonna start off by like from my opinions. I'm really really happy for Gustaph because he just seems like the sweetest guy ever. What I love is that in 2021 and 2018 he was a backing vocalist for Hooverphonic Scenic, and I just like the journey for him to like get to the main stage from being a backing vocalist and now he's the main artist. I just love that for him. I just think that's a great little story. Because then you can tell, oh, he has love for the contest just like we do. So, and it's nice to just follow that little journey. I personally did have other favourites in Eurosong 2023, but I think this is still a decent choice for Belgium. Gustaph has a lot of personality and stage presence, which in a televote only year, I think we do have to keep this in mind, is probably going to be a really, really good thing. I also felt this song was staged really well, a Eurosong, and I just felt it really came together nicely on the night. I'm not actually surprised that the juries and televoters liked the overall package the most from what we saw on Saturday night. I think like it came together really, really well on stage. And I think that's what got him over the line and winning. And yeah, I'm just really, really happy for him. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more now about the just the overall setup of Saturday night show in particular. We'll talk more about the week, the shows in the week a little later on, and talk more about some of the other entries from Saturday night that we also really enjoyed.
Yeah, so I found the live performances on Saturday fun overall. I thought the show was fun. I ought to mention at this point that I was covering MGP. So I wasn't able to experience all of it live as it happened. I basically switched over as soon as NGP was happening earlier in the night. So I was able to switch over and catch like the last few songs, like maybe I think about half of the show, maybe I was able to catch. What I did catch was so fun, which was nice to see. I love this national final format for Belgium. It was chaotic. And I think what I did miss actually was there's been some conversation about the jury commentary. I can't speak to that personally. I'm just noticing that there's a little bit of dissatisfaction among, there's some discourse among the fandom about some of the things that some of the jury members, mostly Alexander Rybak, I'm not said. I'm interested to hear what, obviously if you're comfortable commenting on it, Jazzy, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, because I know you caught the show more than I did.
I feel like commenting on it now just because it's been brought up. Basically, Alexander Rybak basically told Gala Drago that she didn't need to mention her story. She didn't need to tell people that she had a story to her song, and I feel like, I don't know. I just felt like, yeah, it was a little bit. I didn't really agree with what he was saying. I feel like a lot of artists tell us the story behind their song. I just don't think he should have done that. But
yeah, that is a bit odd, isn't
my
it?
opinion. I know some Euro fans disagree and actually think he did the right thing. I don't, and I think she is, at the end of the day, 17 years old. I feel like that sort of criticism, and she answered him back. She like I'm so proud of her.
Good for her. She's very self-possessed for a 70. I had no idea she was that young at all. If you told me she was 10 years older, I'd have believed you, which sounds wild. I'm 38. So at a certain point, everybody under the age of 30, I'm like, young ones, So I'm not the best judge of age at this point.
Bang in the middle, that I'm 27.
Yeah, but I mean, the reason that she reads as older is that she's really comfortable in herself, for someone of that age. And I think part of that comes from, probably come from the fact that her father is obviously an accomplished musician and well known in Albania. I think that growing up around that must kind of give you an element of, well, I mean, it's also just character. Like, she has a really lovely kind of, she is her age. When you hear her interviewed, you're like, oh, you are a kid, but like, she has a lovely sense of self-possession and poise. So good for her for answering back. And it's interesting that is an interesting point, and probably a conversation kind of separate to this for another day, but how much of an artist's story should we hear before we hear their song? I think, if anything, in Eurovision we don't hear enough of the artist's story. Like, I would love to see more of the artist's stories. I think it would add a lot to our appreciation of Eurovision songs generally. So I'm not averse to hearing that in a national final at all. It's not like she's out there telling us a sob story to try and get votes or anything. It's just, she does have an interesting story. I mean, I'm biased, she's also somebody who's from more than one place, and so am I. So I would say that. But yeah, I'm aware that there's discourse, is why I brought it up. I can't really comment on that. I will just say, though, that it is worth noting that the jury members that we saw in live giving their comments are not the whole jury. The jury was actually much larger, larger by like 2 or 3 times almost, I think. Apologies for not having the numbers to hand, but it's worth noting that it's not like Alexander Rybak didn't have like 25% of the jury vote. He had more like 5% of the jury vote. You know what I mean? So I think that it's quite a clever move in a way to have like your most TV friendly, maybe your most recognizable jury members, 4 or 5 jury members on the live show, but actually to have, in terms of the jury scoring, input from like a panel of 15 or something, like that kind of, that's better to me than having like just 6 jury members on the live show, and that is actually the entire jury vote is coming from just those 6 jury members, which is what we see in some of the other national finals. So I liked that they had that kind of slightly larger jury, although I understand that maybe not everybody knew that, and so that's why we're seeing a lot of people today going, it's Alexander Rybak's fault that that my favorite didn't go through or whatever. I will say that I know we're going to touch on this in the next segment, but I found the daily shows in the week leading up a little odd as a format. The sort of part reality show, part selection process. But I quite liked the daily Dear Diary sort of, not quite, but like, do you know what I mean? There was a diary feel to that process, which generated a sense of connection with the artists, which we might not have got if we'd just gone straight into the final. I know Angus has said, Angus was live tweeting for us, and I know that other people have said that they could have made this just a one show. It didn't have to be a daily show every night and then the final. And I agree with that. They could have done a Eurovision France, c'est vous qui décidez situation and just released the songs ahead of time and then just on one show and it's over. But I actually always find with that it feels over too quickly when you do that. I prefer this sort of getting to know the artists a little bit, getting to see their dynamic together as well. And then, we create more of a connection, not just with them, but also with their songs. Quite clever to do the thing of selecting between 2 songs and making that public, because again, that generates a sense of, we as the audience get to know what the artist is like beyond just that one song. And we also generate a bit more of a connection with the artist and also all of the artists as a group. And the other thing I think that managed to do quite well was to foster bonds between the artists, and that was a highlight for me of the final, particularly, was seeing the artists supporting each other. There are always some exceptions. We saw one sore loser who shall remain nameless, which I understand people are upset afterwards, especially if they don't feel like it was fair or like it didn't go their way. But it was far and beyond that. It was so nice to see the artists showing support for each other. Like, we saw both Gala and Shireen really hyping up Gustaph on social media, and Gustaph is getting some pushback and some backlash, which I think is a lot of it does come from disappointment at people's favorites not making it, but also, let's be real, comes from homophobia and queerphobia. We've got a flamboyant queer artist here with a flamboyant queer performance, and there is there's a sordid underbelly to what the sorts of pushback we're getting now in the wake of it. So it's really nice to see the artists supporting each other. No one deserves hate. I don't care how much you hate the song. No one as a person deserves that kind of backlash and that kind of hate. I think that, the Ukrainian broadcasters could take a look at that, and the Vidbir is such a contrast in terms of immediately after the final's over, like, people start throwing allegations about vote rigging and about the artists breaking laws and whatever, and it seems to be kind of a bit of a culture within, and I can only assume it's a broadcaster issue because we see it again and again in the Ukrainian national finals. It's such a shame because they're always so high quality, and it just kind of really undermines the joy of that event and the kind of how well all the artists do. It's not all about winning, whereas with this, more so, we saw artists kind of expressing delight having been there, and they can always come back. You sort of leave the door open to come back when you're graceful and gracious, I think, about losing. And I wonder whether part of that was the format they chose, which was this sort of living in close quarters, filming in close quarters, the artists giving each other feedback on their songs, which is really interesting. I just think that they fostered a sense of community within that group of artists, and I think that's brilliant. I think that's so clever that they managed to do that. I will say that I think that some of the Daily Show performances ended up being almost a bit stronger, certainly vocally a bit stronger. And this might just be me, but it felt to me like some of the final performances we saw last night, they sounded a little bit vocally tired, some of them, and some of them even almost a little bit strained at times. And I wonder whether it's a combination of having it's higher pressure, so it's harder to relax. And when you're not relaxed in your body, your voice does reflect that. Whereas the Daily Show's very low stakes, just choosing between two songs, nothing kind of, nothing too intense. And I wonder also whether it just all the artists might have done with some more vocal support. But I'm no expert. That was just my impression. The show overall I really liked, and I hope they keep it because I look forward to it next year.
I actually enjoyed quite a few songs. We last night I enjoyed Hunter Falls's Ooh La La. I just found the song catchy and enjoyable. I also really liked Amira's song The Carnival. I specifically really liked how Amira starred. I think she looked super, super pretty, and the song was cute as well. I really enjoyed Gala Drago's performance of Ten Kiet. I think it was really intriguing and powerful. It wasn't really a song that jumped out from me from the snippets, but the full version and stage show did give me a bit of a wow moment. And if of course, I also really enjoyed Shireen's performance of Simone Pa. I think Shireen is adorable and I adore her voice. I think it's so unique. The song is infectious. I have had it on repeat since it came out on Friday. And yeah, I'm just in love with it. And it may not go to Eurovision, but it will always have a spot on my national final playlist. I guess just a small note for the last point, really, just really, really brief. Obviously, the artists all had a second song they could have chosen. Were there any of them that you have listened to that you enjoyed?
I think the quality of all the songs was generally high enough that I don't think that anyone made a bad choice, in sending the song that they did send to the final. It was more a question of personal preference. I think it's worth noting that the Starlings were the only act to choose contrary to the advice that they received from the other contestants, which is interesting. But it's impossible to know whether they would have won with Oceanside. I prefer Oceanside. I think it allows Kato's voice to shine more than Roller Coaster does, but the instrumentation on Roller Coaster is so pretty. For me, the lyrics to the Carnival were a little misguided. Like I liked so much about the song and so much about, I agree, the styling was glorious, but and the message, I love the message. But just as a person with multiple chronic mental illnesses, to me, the language used wasn't the best. So for that reason, I would have preferred to see Armageddon go to the final, just because Amira is such a good performer, such a fab voice. I liked the moody 80s club vibe of Gustaf's The Nail, but because of you was probably the more competitive choice. And I think that similarly, Shireen, Hunter Falls, and Loredana all chose the more competitive of each of their two songs, which meant they left behind the more ballad adjacent songs, which I thought were all really pretty. But, I think my big favorite from the ones that were left behind, though, was Gala Drago's Emotion Ollie. I think it's so special. It's so weird and creepy and experimental. And yet the beat in the build-up is so good that I think it kind of does have a bit more of a potential, like a commercial aspect there too. Tanket has a lot of the same qualities as Emotion Ollie, but it just, to me, feels a touch more derivative. It's still great. I just found Emotion Ollie breathtaking. So that's my big favorite from the songs they left behind. I just, she's so young, and she's 17, as we said, and she wrote both of these songs when she was 15, which she just has such a strong sense of what she artistically wants to do. And I just really hope we see her in Eurovision in the future because, wow, she's a special artist.
I actually personally feel like all the artists made the right choice for what song they picked. There were a couple of songs that I would definitely stream on Spotify though. Moon Et Lee from Shireen, again, I just love her voice so much, and this is just the cutest ballad. The other song I also really enjoyed was Home by Hunter Falls. I found it really like anthemic. Yes, it sounds like your typical Melfest entry, but I just like that. I think Hunter's music is probably also the music I would gravitate towards outside of Eurovision. And I look at all their songs together. Hunter Folds' music is obviously the one that I would just gravitate towards, and I'm more likely to listen to. Just a side note, his voice did remind me of someone. I feel like I figured out who it is, and it's Mons from 2015.
Interesting. I see that. I see.
Um, I was like, is it Mons Zummerloff or is it more Stefan? Like, it's just he has that vibe that those two had for some reason for me.
Uplifting kind of commercial sound, but
Yeah,
like, but really like you feel like you've heard it before, but that that gives you a
like I
familiar.
like the familiarity of it.
I hear
Um,
you.
and I feel like just another thing for the Monday shows. I guess Isabel's kind of covered this, but I really just like the togetherness between all the artists, and it just really translated in the live show on Saturday. I just found the bonds like all just super cute, and I love how like genuinely happy they all seemed for each other. It was just really really nice to see because I don't think we've ever seen that in a national final before. And that takes us to the end of this recap video. I would like to thank Isabelle for joining me this evening. This has been really, really fun. We're just the two of us, never been on a two-person thing before, so that's really, really nice. I would like to remind viewers, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel, That's Eurovision site, where we will have national final recaps, previews, interviews coming up. So make sure you're following us on YouTube, subscribing to us on YouTube, and also give us a follow over at That Euro site on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to stay up to date with all the Eurovision 2023 news and any junior Eurovision news and any American Song Contest news. If we're going to get that, I do not know, as well as following That Eurovision podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so you can be notified when new episodes of the podcast come out. You can also now listen to all our video content on the go via our podcast because we've started putting all our video content on there, such as our recaps, our interviews. So you can now listen to all our content on the go, which I think is brilliant. And I think all that's left us to say now is bye.
Dag. Au revoir.